Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink I have in cartridge form by Herbin Ink, or Lie to Thee, as I've heard it called sometimes. But yeah, it's a tea-colored ink. All the tests were done in this Kaweco Sport with a broad nib. Let's check out the chromatography because this ink is weird, y'all. See if I can get this in the light. Now, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on in here. There's this gray, this sort of like dark gray, and this little bit of like hint of lavendery kind of thing going on. And then it goes up into like a bright orange. And then right at the corners there's this sort of sunshiny yellow business. So yeah, and as you can tell, probably some potential for water resistance, though in a very different color. Starting from the top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, it shades a lot. It's kind of a golden brown kind of a color, and it goes into a very rich darker brown. You can see it all throughout the writing. Yeah, it's 22 seconds to dry, but it is a fairly shading ink, and it was a broad nib, so I said better flow than most J. Herbin inks because in my experience they tend to be a bit dry. This shade's a lot better, the color's a lot more interesting. Yeah, so, and then the water test, as you can see, it's much closer to like a grayish color than brown, and even here. But yeah, pretty water resistant. I mean, overall, pretty water resistant. And that's because I put it down in something, but no bleed. Not a tremendous amount of echo, but this is very dense paper. Next is Rhodia 80 grams per square meter, where again, you have this almost insane level of shading. 21 seconds to dry. I mean, look at the shading in the words, too. It's just really intense. And it's a nice golden brown kind of a color. It's a orangey golden brown. It goes into a nice sort of, I don't know, chestnutty brown. No bleed feather spread, even in the wettest parts. No sheen. Still fairly water resistant, though again in a different color. And for some reason on camera it's turning it much more brown. In person, this is a straight up gray. But yeah, so yeah, good bit of show through on the scrubby. But next is Tomoe River Paper, where I feel like it got a bit lighter. Like, I feel like here that golden brownness kind of came through a bit more. But, yeah, almost reminds me of Kaweco Sport. 22 seconds to dry, which makes sense. It's a broad nib, and it's Tomoe River. No sheen, even in the really, really wet scrubby. Good flow, which, again, I'm not used to with J. Herbin inks. Decent water resistance. Again, that's pretty readable, and this is Tomoe River Paper. It loves to let ink just wash away. No bleed through, though in that really intense scrubby there's some echo. Next is the newer 20-pound copier paper. So, not as good as the old stuff, but not as bad as the stuff I got after it. There is a bit of woolliness. It's almost like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to spread or feather, so it sort of split the difference. It's 3 seconds to dry, which isn't bad. Here in the scrubby there's no shading, but you still get a bit in the words. It does look a bit lighter. We're going into this sort of that golden brown color. This is a bit of a mess. And again, on camera, it's making it look much more brown, but the heart of this is very, very gray. And then you get sort of the brownish feather explodey bits around the side that are almost orange. And again, this is a broad nib, so, you know, with a grain of salt. That's so orange on the back. That's kind of cool. That looks like the chromatography test. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where it definitely became that golden orangey brown. Again, it's feathering a bit, but this is a broad nib. 3.5 seconds to dry. Yeah, it's you still kind of get some shading, I mean a little bit. Yeah, I said not loving this pen paper ink combo. That's, I mean, what's at the heart of that is pretty readable. It's pretty dark, but then you have this sort of color explosion and feather explosion around it. For a broad nib, that could be worse because this is Mead paper, and Mead paper is horrible. And next is Moleskine Notebook Paper, where, yeah, it got kind of flat and light, and, yeah, it just sort of became more, yeah, kind of blah. And the feathering is pretty bad. I mean, it's really quite bad. But again, this is a broad nib, so, you know, there are better choices for this kind of paper. It's still fairly there. It's still fairly dark. I mean, like what's, you know, where the actual lines were. But you do have these explosions of feather and color, and that's pretty bad. And actually, I remember when I was writing this, what I was writing on actually ended up getting a dot or two on the other side. So there you go. There's Herbin's Lidité. It's an interesting brown. I'm really not a fan of Herbin inks because for a long time people would, like my family would give me cartridges. They would just buy me cartridges, and they gave me a lot of Herbin because they came in these little tins. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but this one might be my favorite out of the bunch. So, yeah, I can recommend it. Maybe don't put it in a broad nib on the crappiest paper you can find, but it's interesting. I don't know if it's dark enough to be socially acceptable in the workplace, but it's a beautiful color. So for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.